The Vault of Death. With this episode, we're reintroduced to two of our favourite characters, Lady Penelope and Parker, who've been away for quite some time, haven't they?
Yeah, they have, and it's not just them who sort of start off the show. This entire episode is pretty much dedicated to them by how British it is.
Yeah, the Tracys don't show up until like 25 minutes in or something. The whole first half is dedicated solely to establishing the scenario and being with Lady Penelope and Parker and Lord Silton, not Stilton, Silton.
I couldn't help but thinking it was Stilton as you were watching it.
These three characters for the entire first half of the show is just focused on them.
I think Anderson knew these two were going to be the fan favourites, or at least some of the fan favourites, so being such a British show, and I'm pretty sure he knew that adults were going to be watching this with the kids as well, so there's going to be a load of adult humour, so anyone who remembers 1950s or 40s England, you know, this was a real tribute to it.
Yeah, it reinforces how much Gerry Anderson likes to do all those, for lack of a better word, English-isms, the little novelty, old-timey stuff that makes British humour so, you know, unique.
And now down to the plot. This episode is really quite unique because it really focuses on Parker and what he did before he got involved with international rescue. I mean, we mentioned in earlier episodes that he's a reformed con, so here we discover that he is probably the most amazing or prolific safecracker in the entire world, or at least the whole of England.
That's right. The whole episode opens up with quite a sinister opening where we see Parker and Lady Penelope robbing the Bank of England, breaking into the vault. But once Parker does manage to break in after 2.5 hours, they knock out a policeman at the beginning as well, which is quite funny. But after they finally, after some tense, build-up, break into the vault, they're greeted with a celebratory round of applause by the bankers. Oh, jolly good, you broke into our vault. And obviously it's established that this was just one big massive demonstration to show the people who own the bank we need a stronger vault. So they get this big industrial vault with a massive, metre-thick door of titanium steel to lock up the vault. And as if that's not enough, they pump all of the air out of it to make sure that, the notes are still fresh or something. I don't know.
Says it'll keep them safe in a vacuum, all the money and all the documents.
But herein lies the dilemma. Lord Silton has the only key that can open this vault, and he's away holidaying with Lady Penelope in her mansion. At the same time, they've accidentally locked in Mr. Lambert, who is a guy who is notorious amongst the bank's other workers for burying his nose into his book, and he's there doing all his work in this vault while they've locked it up and left all the air to be pumped out. So obviously they've got to get that key back and unlock the vault before he suffocates.
It's kind of a ridiculous concept. Only one copy of one key is made. I mean, what about the company that designed the entire vault? They must have had at least a copy somewhere, or at least the key maker who made this key for Lord Stilton,
Silton.
Only one key was ever made for this vault, which is quite ridiculous, I have to say, as a design. I mean, I'm no security expert, but I know if you were designing probably the greatest security system in the entire world, you'd need at least one more key. It's like in black books where the guy only gives Bernard the combination once, and then Manny locks him out.
What would happen if Silton was to drive off a cliff and go into the river? The key would be gone, and there would be no way to get into the vault.
That almost happens actually in this episode. They almost go over a cliff.
We'll get to that soon enough.
Yeah, but I'm not joking. They actually almost go over a cliff in the car. This is such a caper episode. They must have been influenced by heist episodes or something.
Yeah, a lot of British humour in this episode. But once Lady Penelope and Silton find out from communication that something is going down at the Bank of England, at the same time as this is going on, Parker has learned that his old chum from prison, his old cellmate, who's just as good of a safecracker as he is, a guy by the name of Light-Fingered Fred, has escaped from jail. So as some kind of unwritten code of honour, Parker does everything in his power to delay them getting to London to give his friend a chance to rob the bank. That's at least what he thinks is going on. Little do they know that it's actually someone suffocating to death inside the vault.
Doesn't that sound a bit dirty to you, Light-Fingered Fred?
Poor Lavender.
And it is because of Parker's, unwritten law for his old colleague that he ends up almost driving them off Lover's Leap.
That's right. He takes a detour into Nowhere Heath. Stops in Lover's Leap.
I wonder if that was some kind of subliminal message to Ted Heath, who was the Tory leader at the time.
Or some kind of jab at Greece, where all of the couples go to make out in their cars.
Oh dear me. But yeah, this is where we first see Penelope driving Fab 1.
Yeah, she's finally had enough of Parker's delays, going at slow speeds on the road, cutting the wires, but taking the detour to Nowhere Heath. So she's like, right, I'm just going to drive. And she, in probably the worst representation of women drivers ever, drives fucking Fab 1 around like a bumper car, smashing into trees and fences and other cars in a desperate attempt to get them to London in time. The whole time, Silton and Parker in the back just peeking up. Like, we're gonna hit a tree, milady.
And then we come down to the hero of the day of this episode, which actually turns out to be Grandma Tracy.
You, Grandma?
Quite strangely, she remembers that the London Underground used to exist before London became dominated by monorails. So we end up seeing Alan and Virgil using the wittiest use of London Underground before Thor: The Dark World.
How do I get to Greenwich?
Take this train, 3 stops.
Mind the gap.
But yeah, Virgil and Alan, initially they try and cut through the big steel door with like laser guns or fire guns or something, but when they realise that that's futile and they won't get there in time before Lambert suffocates, Grandma comes up with the idea that they try and go underneath through the underground, and sure enough, that's a much quicker and faster way to get to him.
So the underground is no longer in use, and there's now monorails all over London. I don't know about you, I think that would really spoil the scene. I mean, it would really spoil the cityscape. It would be
Total eyesore.
Yeah, but I mean, can you imagine all the... imagine like London now with all of its skyscrapers and the Shard and all the big, big amazing historic buildings, and then you have all of like Spaghetti Junction growing up around it.
It'd be like in Futurama, you've got all those travel pipes going over the place, just like ugly as fuck.
Yeah, it would be, but then again, that's New York, so who knows that this isn't New London.
New London.
Even though there technically is a New London somewhere. I'm sure there's one in America or something.
But anyway, that's the main thing that this episode has got going for it. Just the focus on Lady Penelope and Parker, all the Englishisms. In fact, we're introduced to a couple of English characters who, we've got Lord Silton. We're introduced to Light-Fingered Fred, Parker's old cellmate, who's just... absolute. He reminds me of Del Boy, actually. Just that kind of absolute, you're having a laugh, aren't you, Nosy?
I may not have been a friend of society up till now, but I'm going to reform and settle down. Just as soon as I knocked off the Bank of England.
And we're introduced to Lady Penelope's kitchen staff.
Yeah,
and
so it's the cook.
Yeah, the cook, who's, and there's this hilarious scene where she's preparing food for them, and she's talking about all this fancy food she's going to give to Penny and Silton. And Parker's there just criticising her food. It's like, oh, it's muck.
And if you pay attention to her voice, it actually is Lady Penelope trying to sound Cockney.
Hey, what you got for me then?
Stew.
Oh, me favourite.
I spoil you, don't I?
It's like if Lady Penelope was trying to do an impression of Parker, like, all right, nosy Parker.
Or maybe it's like some sort of parallel Penelope. Perhaps she's like her long-lost relative or something. Someone who got demoted or fell out of the aristocracy, perhaps. Maybe
The Crichton Ward who didn't do well in schools.
Maybe it's the bastard child of Crichton Ward. Maybe it's Crichton Ward's long-lost sister, and she employed her knowing that she would be kept below and not be part of international rescue. I mean, who knows? Maybe she was dumb enough to try and steal the secrets of international rescue, and so she confined her to the kitchen staff.
Could you imagine an episode of Thunderbirds called The Bastard of Crichton Ward? That'd be another old, like, English-esque episode. Just like international rescue trying to save Lady Penelope from her Cockney sister.
This is ridiculous.
Well, it's quite an interesting rescue, this one, because it's only one man trapped in a vault, and he's a banker, so it goes to show the international rescue will rescue anyone from any area of society. I mean, we wouldn't certainly save a banker these days.
Yeah, what an unrealistic show, saving a banker from a vault. Today it'd be like, what's that, John? A banker stuck in a vault? Leave it, light a cigarette. Nah, don't bother. You're having a laugh.
There's a reason why banker rhymes with wanker.
But yeah, eventually, so not only are Virgil and Alan blasting their way through to save the banker, but at the end of the day, Parker shows his worth as the world's greatest safecracker when he manages to open the most secure vault in the world with this big heavy door, and only one key can open it, with a hairpin. Manages to crack open the most secure vault in the world with a hairpin.
Ingenious, isn't it? And apparently he only took his time on the first one because he had an audience.
Yeah, he wanted to show himself off. Well, not reveal his like a magician.
But anyway, I think what's interesting about this episode is how it's meant to be the future, but it's such a traditional, conservative England still. Everyone is still upper class, and the guy even says at the beginning, I deplore change. So that is Britain for you. I don't like change.
Yeah, it's got that kind of Victorian feel, especially with like the smoggy opening and the old Bill standing there just like looking around, There's no big accident that opens up the title. It's just literally Vault of Death against an old Bill standing there against the Bank of England. But anyway, that was Vault of Death. It was a very good episode, one of my favourites because of all the Englishisms and the focus on the ever-loving Penny and Parker.
Oh, yes. And I liked it because, it doesn't fully focus on the Tracys. They only come in halfway through, so you know that all these other characters play prominent roles and have lives of their own and deal with their own problems. So I guess this must have been, the one confined to England, because lots of rescues in lots of episodes are confined either to America or France or Spain or wherever.
So stick around for the next episode, which is The Mighty Atom, which sees the return of another recurring character, the Hood, where he tries once again to sabotage the Thunderbirds with the oddest of weapons.
Yes, we'll let you know that weapon later on, so stay tuned.
FAB.
FAB.